When you look at the Persian Gulf, the divide is just massive. On one side, you've got these gleaming skyscrapers backed by trillions of dollars in oil money. And on the other, a nation that's learned how to survive, even thrive, under decades of crushing sanctions. Now, this isn't some ancient feud. This is a very modern power struggle, a kind of Cold War, where the biggest threat, it's probably not what you're thinking.
So what is it? Why do these incredibly wealthy Arab states actually fear Iran so much? It's easy to just point a finger at religion or some old history, but that's not it. The real answer, the thing that actually keeps leaders in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi awake at night, is something far more modern and, frankly, a lot more dangerous.
See, the fear isn't about some big conventional invasion. We're not talking about tanks rolling across the desert. The fear is that Iran has figured out how to win without an invasion. They've perfected a new way to project power, to destabilize their rivals, and get what they want without ever needing a traditional army. It's a whole new kind of conflict.
And if you want a perfect example of this, just look at what happened on September 14th, 2019. This was the moment the theory became a terrifying, smoking reality. Imagine this. In the middle of the night, a whole swarm of low-flying drones and cruise missiles just slips past billions of dollars worth of Saudi air defenses. They hit the Abqaiq oil facility. I mean, this is the absolute heart of the Saudi oil empire. And then, boom. In less than 20 minutes, 5% of the entire world's daily oil supply just vanished. Gone.
I mean, you can't overstate the shockwave this sent through the Gulf. Saudi Arabia had spent, literally, hundreds of billions of dollars on the best military technology money can buy. And against a swarm of cheap drones, it was all completely useless. That had to be such a brutal realization. All their incredible wealth couldn't protect them from this new kind of war.
Okay, so to really get this, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with what this war without armies really is. Then we'll dig into the revolutionary divide that started it all. After that, we'll look at Iran's proxy network, how they literally weaponized the map, the huge deal with the nuclear red line, and finally, what this all means for an incredibly unstable future.
All right, let's get into it. Part 1. The revolutionary divide. Because to understand what's happening now, you've got to go back to 1979. That's the year this whole thing went from a simple rivalry to an existential fight for survival.
Okay, first things first, let's get a couple of key things straight. Iranians, they're not Arab, they're mostly Persian. They speak Farsi, which, fun fact, is actually closer to English than it is to Arabic. But the really big difference, the one that shapes everything, is religion. Since way back in the 1500s, Iran has been the absolute center of Shia Islam.
And that right there creates a huge strategic problem for Tehran. See, Shias are a minority in the Muslim world, only about 15%. So you've got this Shia power, Iran, basically surrounded by a sea of Sunni countries, with its biggest rival, Saudi Arabia, leading the pack. Being the minority like that has totally shaped how Iran sees the world, why its foreign policy is often so defensive, and yeah, often pretty aggressive too.
You know, for a long time, this was all manageable. Before 1979, you had the Shah of Iran. He was a monarch, just like the Arab kings. They didn't really like each other, but they got each other. They played by the same rules. But then, 1979 happened, and everything, I mean everything, changed. The Islamic Revolution wasn't just a new government. It was a whole new ideology. Ayatollah Khomeini came in and said monarchy itself is against Islam. And he didn't just say it for Iran. He said his revolution was for the entire Muslim world.
You can imagine how the Gulf monarchies heard that. It was basically a declaration of war. Suddenly, Iran was talking directly to the Shia people living inside their countries, totally going over the heads of the rulers, telling them to resist. For the Arab kings, the message was terrifyingly simple. Iran had just turned identity into a weapon. Their own people were now a potential threat from within.
So facing this massive threat, Iran had to get creative. It had to come up with a whole new strategy for survival. And that brings us right to our next section, Iran's proxy network, or what it likes to call its axis of resistance.
This whole strategy was really born in the fire of the Iran-Iraq War. I mean, we're talking 8 brutal years of fighting. When Saddam Hussein invaded back in 1980, who was funding his war? The Arab Gulf states. For Iran, that was a lesson they never, ever forgot. It was burned into their minds. Never again will we be boxed in and attacked like that.
So what did they do? Instead of pouring money into a giant conventional army to sit on its borders, Iran did something much smarter. It decided to move the battlefield. They started building this huge network of friendly militias and political groups all over the Middle East.
The endgame? Something they call the land bridge, a solid line of influence that runs all the way from Tehran, cuts through Iraq and Syria, and ends right on the Mediterranean coast in Lebanon.
So just how powerful is this network? Well, let's just take one example. Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is Iran's star player, its crown jewel. We're talking about a group that's more powerful than the actual Lebanese army. It has an arsenal of more than 150,000 rockets and missiles. Just think about that number. That's the nightmare scenario for Iran's enemies, made completely real.
And this proxy strategy is also brilliant economically, for Iran at least. It creates this crazy imbalance. Okay, so think about this. For Saudi Arabia to shoot down an incoming missile, they use a Patriot interceptor. One of those costs about $3 million.
Now, what about the thing they're shooting at? An Iranian-designed drone, like the ones the Houthis use? That can cost as little as $20,000. You see the problem here? The math just doesn't work for the defenders. It's totally unsustainable. Iran can just bleed its rich rivals dry, super cheap, and all the while they can say, hey, wasn't us.
This lopsided economic fight brings us perfectly to our next point. Section 3. Weaponizing the map. This is all about how Iran uses the region's own geography against its enemies.
You really have to understand, these two sides are running on completely different operating systems. The Gulf monarchies, their entire model is based on stability. They need calm seas, foreign investment, predictable oil markets. I mean, you can't exactly host the World Cup if there's a war next door, right? But Iran? After decades of sanctions, it's built what it calls a resistance economy. It's tough. It's used to chaos. In a way, it thrives on it.
And there's no better example of this vulnerability than the Strait of Hormuz. Just look at it on a map. This tiny, narrow strip of water is the economic lifeline for the entire Arab world. We're talking about 20% of all the world's oil passing through here every single day. And who controls the entire northern coast of that strait? Iran. It gives them a literal chokehold on the world's economy.
You know, someone once said, this is basically Iran's nuclear option, without needing a nuke. And it's so true. Just the threat of closing that strait is a massive strategic weapon. They can cause billions in damage to their rivals, and honestly to the whole world, without ever launching a single major missile.
But okay, if the strait is the big conventional threat, there's another one that's truly existential. And that brings us to the next section, the nuclear red line. This is the one thing that could take this whole Cold War and turn it into a hot global crisis.
So Iran says its nuclear program is just for peaceful energy. But, the numbers just don't add up. Right now, they're enriching uranium up to 60% purity. To put that in perspective, you only need about 3 to 5% for a power plant. 60%? There's really only one reason you go that high. It's a stepping stone to a bomb.
And because they're so close, the estimates for their breakout time, that's the time it would take to get enough material for one bomb, it's not years anymore. It's not even months. We are talking about weeks. The clock is ticking, and it's ticking fast.
And for Saudi Arabia, this is it. This is the ultimate red line. They've been crystal clear about it, saying it publicly. If Iran gets a bomb, we will get a bomb. And you have to believe them. This isn't a bluff. What you'd see is a terrifying nuclear arms race kick off in what's already the most unstable region on the planet.
So, after all this, where is this heading? What does the future look like? Well, it's pretty unstable, but we can see about 3 possible ways this could go.
Okay, path number 1. The regime in Iran just collapses from the inside, from all the protests and economic problems. Path 2, we see some shaky diplomacy, kind of like that deal China helped broker, where everyone just agrees to take a breather for a little while. But then there's path 3, and honestly, it's the most likely. And that's that this just keeps going. A permanent, tense, and dangerous Cold War that just becomes the new normal for the Middle East. And that leaves us with one last, pretty sobering thought. At the end of the day, you have the Arab monarchies who just want things to stay the same. They want stability. And then you have Iran, a revolutionary power that wants to tear down the old order. As long as those two goals are polar opposites, this fight is going to continue. So the real question is, in a region so packed with proxies and drones and now nuclear ambition, how many mistakes can be made before this Cold War gets very, very hot?